Welcome to another episode of Clear Lake Connections, where we talk to the people behind the businesses of Bay Area Houston, proudly sponsored by UTMB Health. Today's special guest is Jay Coppock, and you are here on behalf of SERVE.
Correct.
Could you tell me what SERVE is, and is it an acronym?
Yes, SERVE is that acronym. It stands for Southeast Resource Veterans Effort. So when we started it, we had to have a catchy name, so SERVE was it. So maybe it's not phonetically correct, but it works for me. But
So how did you've become very heavily involved with working with veterans, and how did that start? What was your inspiration?
yeah, I was fortunate to work for a credit union that allowed me to really delve into the public part of this. And so 10 years ago now, we started looking into creating a community development corporation in order to do mortgages in a more robust fashion for this area. And we ran across a young lady from San Jacinto College who was a grant writer there. Her husband was a Marine, and she started talking about things that were happening, not happening, where veterans were concerned in Galveston County. And it was kind of intriguing, so I started doing a little research and found out that there wasn't a whole lot going on for veterans down here. And don't get me wrong, we have some great VSOs. We've got, the VA has 2 hospitals and clinics down in this area, but it was that connection piece of having veterans be able to find out what's going on. And then to really solidify it, one of the first things we did at the credit union at that time was we went through the Federal Home Loan Bank, got a grant called the Haven Grant, which allowed us to make modifications to veterans' homes to kind of help them with, things that happened, post or while they were serving. And so that could have been, a ramp for their house, stairs, so on and so forth. This guy needed his backyard redone. And so we ended up doing the grant for that. The community found out about it, and so we ended up going from about a $7,500 grant to almost $30,000 in work to fix this guy's backyard. He had a debilitating shrapnel in his spine, and so he really couldn't play outdoors because the ground was, kind of like a concrete floor.
Yeah.
And so we got that done. Well, what happened was that there was a gentleman in there that worked for the credit union who was next door neighbors of a veteran. Veteran had worked for their own nonprofit, and so he brought him to the credit union to introduce him to me. It just so happens that a good friend of mine, Sam Alex, who works for Champ, or runs his own nonprofit, Champ, was in the office that day, and so I introduced him. And I said, hey, Sam, do you know Donnie? Donnie, you know Sam? Nope. Do you have any idea what the other one does? Nope. And a light bulb went off. It says, wait a minute. My wife had been taking me to BNI, Business Networking International, and so I like the concept of having a group of people around a table that you go around and introduce, and you kind of have this repetitive nature of it. And I don't know what it was, but all of a sudden, the first iteration of the name was VNI, Veteran Network International. And she said, if you do that, you're going to get sued 100 ways next Sunday. And I said, okay, so we'll come up with something different. But the concept of having organizations, BNI was structured to be one of each. This was, don't care. If you're veteran-centric, you like veterans, you can help, go on. And so I found 3 other folks besides those 2. 6 of us sat down and we founded SERVE in August of 2015. And from there, we started with the 6, and today we have a little over 75 or 80 that we partner with, and they're all over the greater Houston area. And it's designed to prevent the veteran from having to really track down resources. If they have a question, just ask.
Almost like a clearinghouse of resources.
Correct. And so they ask one question. They'll say, hey, I need help with X. And so if I can help with X and I know how to do it, we'll take care of it with my group. If I can't.
But if you don't, you know who can.
Correct.
Okay.
Like, perfect example, I had somebody reach out from the American Red Cross. They have a donor that wants to donate a 50-foot trailer of food in North Carolina. And so she's here locally with the American Red Cross, and she called me and said, do you have a connection for veterans in North Carolina? I said, I don't, but I know who does. And so we're in the process of trying to connect her with somebody that they could deliver this, food and emergency supplies for Thanksgiving for the folks of North Carolina. I hope we get it pulled off. But the whole point was she just picked up the phone and said, hey, do you know a guy? And I'm like, okay, let's see if we can find a guy.
So you guys are connectors.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And so we added about 4 years ago when COVID hit. Has it been 4 years?
Yeah.
So in COVID, when COVID hit, we were still just connecting, and we had a local gentleman and his wife who really liked what we were doing and gave us a donation during COVID. And with that, we were able to set a kind of a pattern or precedent of being able to help folks with their rent, utilities, car payments, things that would help them improve their lives in this area. And from that, I was able to connect with United Way. And now I have a perpetual grant for the Galveston County area so that if somebody needs help with their light bill or food or whatever, we have a little bit of money that we can go out and
Okay.
help out. So a lot of that is, taking the burden off of them. A lot of cases they'll be they'll work, they have real bad PTSD, something happens at work, they get triggered, they end up losing their job, which then affects their rent and their utilities. And I mean, it's a snowball effect.
Right.
And so we try to solve the problem, not financially, because that's the easy part, writing a check or giving a gift card. It's what are the mental health resources? What kind of counseling do you need? Do you need counseling? Do you need food? Do you need to change where you live? Is that's what's causing the issue? And so we kind of look at it holistically and go, okay, just because you have problem A, what's B, C, D, and E potentially with it? So
how big has the organization grown now?
So we have myself. It's kind of interesting with the credit union, ACU or Associated Credit Union. When I left there, I actually retired in June. So I'm doing this full time now. I moved it out from underneath them to here to myself. And so it's a standalone 501c3 now. I had an advisory board at that time. Now I have a full-fledged board. So I have 7 veterans on there, 2 women, 5 gentlemen, 1 from Vietnam, 2 Marines, an Air Force. I got Army, Navy, and Coast Guard. So I have all 5 branches, not Space Force yet. There's not really veterans of Space Force yet. They're all active duty.
Yeah.
So the 7 of them keep me on track with, do we help this person? How do we do it? And what are the resources available? How do we tell them? How do we not tell them? What do we tell them? Kind of stuff to kind of help them with that. I did not serve. It was something that, when I grew up, time period wise, was just, I graduated high school in '83, so we were outside of the Iran, and nothing was really going on. We were outside the selective service draft at that time, for us old folks. And so it just wasn't something. And so when this happened, for some unknown reason, it was my calling. And we've had a lot of fun doing it.
Well, I can tell you're passionate about it. You've taken this passion and really built something that's helping veterans. It's amazing.
Yeah, and the trick is to make them help themselves. And we can go out and we all see folks on the corner every day, panhandling or whatever. Some of them are veterans, some of them are not. But if they don't ask for the help, we don't help them. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but it's just like any other process or program. I mean, if somebody wants help, they need to ask for it. And so if you were to advocate on behalf of your next door neighbor, that's great. We appreciate that. But we'll get a hold of the neighbor, but the neighbor's got to ask. The only exception to that rule is spouses, obviously. But when the veteran, because if I walk up on a veteran and say, hey, I want to do this, this, and this for you, and he doesn't know who I am or why I'm doing that, it doesn't go over very well because they're extremely prideful. They don't like asking for help. They always think somebody else is more important than they are. And a lot of times they get to...
It's created a bit of a crisis in this country.
It has. I mean, it really is. I mean, they served. They went out of their way to do something that very few people, mathematically do in the United States. And then when they need help, they're the last ones to ask because...
What would you like to see change, like systemically or legislatively, to alleviate some of this?
Mental health has always been something that a veteran won't talk about for fear of losing their job. Because if somebody thinks that they're in crisis or has a mental health issue, then they don't want them around because they don't understand what that truly means. What was interesting, and Rob Hefner, who is a member of the chamber, did one of our speeches. One of the things that he said was that you have to treat a veteran differently in the workplace than you do a civilian. You have to give them a task, then you have to make them own it, and you have to keep them engaged in it. They have to have a purpose, and I think we've lost that a little bit overall. Recently, if you go back in time, I think the last 2 Congresses had the least amount of veterans serving in that position in the last 50 years. And so there's quite a few in our area here that are now back into that fold. So I think legislatively, they got to work on the mental health side of things, and then more importantly, homelessness. That it's absolutely insane how folks that have gone and defended this country don't have a home. They don't have anywhere to go.
Yeah, and that's really been brought to the fore lately.
Yeah, and there is, Galveston County has it's not, Galveston County's not overtly huge compared to Harris County, but they still have a homeless, a very large group of homeless people in this area. You won't see them because we have a lot of rural areas and a lot of wooded, places where they can actually go and just be by themselves. But there is probably, in the last 2 years, I've probably had, 20 cases where we've tried to help. I just put a family in a hotel down in Galveston Friday. And so he's in the middle of having surgery at the VA, lost his house or his apartment, and had nowhere to go. And so we put him up in a hotel for a week to kind of get him stable and find out what's next. But there's no reason for us to be able to do that. So.
Yeah. Well, what's one of your favorite or biggest success stories that you've had through this program?
I don't know. It's kind of odd because when people ask, I don't really worry about the one yesterday. I worry about the one tomorrow. And so the successes are all based on, do they come back into the fold? And so we have very few people that are coming back asking for resources. So that means we're doing a pretty good job of, trying to get them connected and moving forward. The network was designed to connect. It's kind of like this Red Cross. It's a horrible story, but it's one of my favorite as to how the network works is that I have a local Marine, him and his at the time fiance. She was going through the academy in Galveston County, and the teacher there was a deputy chief down in Jones Creek, which is in South Missouri County, but she's teaching a class in Galveston. So the connection, it's an hour away. So they're talking, and so the lady from Jones Creek makes a comment that she had an elderly gentleman die in her town. He was a veteran, and they were trying to contact the family. And so when they contacted the family didn't want to have anything to do with him at all. Wouldn't come pick him up, wouldn't claim him and anything. And so she said, there's no way that a veteran's going to die in my area and not be treated kindly. And so the young lady said, call Jay. Don't know why she said call Jay, but she did. So she called, told me the story. I made one phone call, and within that time period, within 3 days, they had made arrangements to bury him at the National Cemetery in Houston. Full honors. And the lady that brought the story up and made it happen was the one that took the flag as the family member. And I think that's cool, and I get teared up because it's sad that somebody would be treated that way.
Yeah.
But to have somebody say call, and we were able to do that, that's the network. And so I don't know, that's success story is hard because it's a poor guy that didn't know what was,
but it's that
the
story
end result is wonderful.
That story is kind of emblematic of what's the crisis we have with our veterans.
And there are a lot, and we don't know his family history, and we don't know any of that. We don't know if he was, the greatest guy in the world or the worst guy in the world. None of that matters. He fought for the country, and that's where we kind of separate piece of it. We remove all politics from what we do because, there's too much divisiveness with that already. And, with a small group, and it's a small fraternity of people, less than 3% of the population served. And that's not a big number when you talk about 370 million people. And we're sitting at about 18 million veterans right now today. Our greatest generation is less than 100,000 now. They're dying off quicker. Korea veterans, Vietnam veterans, they're going, at a rapid pace as well as the country ages. And so we do have the largest population of veterans in this area, largest population of female veterans. And so, our successes are based on, like I said, that repetitiveness. Are they coming back? And the story about the Korean, veteran is just one of them. There's countless opportunities to help, and that's what's really cool about what we do. It's not me. There's 7 other people in my group, and then there's 75 other, organizations.
So let's talk about helping.
Yeah.
If somebody listening to this wants to help your organization, What do you need? How can they get a hold of you?
So the best way to help is go out to the website, www and then .se southeast for southeast, so setexasheroes.com. On there's a list of the organizations, and so go through that list of organizations and kind of get an idea of just some of what we do, some of that flavor. And unfortunately, not all 75 or 80 of them are on the website because they choose not to be, or it's a marketing thing too. I got to get their logos. But we have, for them to come out, they can, they can volunteer. We do have a food distribution drive that we do once a month, the third Wednesday of every month, which is actually coming up on the 20th this month. Down in front of the Texas City VA. So I love to have volunteers come down there 2:30 to 5:30. We have a drive-through food distribution. We have about anywhere from 125 to 200 cars come through depending upon the weather and the month. And so that's one way. Two, obviously, if somebody wants to make a donation, I won't say no. That's also on the website. But, probably the most important thing that they can do is that just listen. And, if they hear a friend of theirs or a family member that is a veteran that's asking a question, don't turn a deaf ear. Just say, I don't know, but let me ask. And then send them to our website. We have a spot on there that says request assistance. And the one thing I want to stress is that assistance is not I'm in a bad spot. I need I need help. I need money. I need housing. No, they might want to buy a car. I mean, we got a lot of great organizations here that do car loans. They might want to buy a home. They might want to start a business. They might want to volunteer or start their own nonprofit. So it's not all, bad things that are happening to our veterans. I mean, there's a lot that, have done a good job of integrating back into civilian life and integrating. And, everybody handles stress and PTSD a lot different. And so just because somebody has it doesn't mean that they, that there's something wrong. So that helped. The biggest piece is just if you see a veteran, thank them for their service. Especially the Vietnam era, they were never thanked.
They were never given that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then the most important thing is we have the largest population of female veterans in the United States in this, in the state of Texas and in this particular area. When you see a husband and wife standing there, don't automatically, and you think one of them's a veteran, don't always assume it's the guy. Because there's a lot of women that have served and the man stayed home, and the husband stayed home. There's also a lot of two couple, where both of them have served. But I think that, the biggest change in our society in the last 20 years is that women are a lot more prevalent, a lot more prominent in the military. I have a good friend of mine that just got promoted to brigadier general in this area. So they do a heck of a job and, should be commended for it and, put on an equal playing field as anybody. So.
Well, Jay, I want to thank you for coming out. I want to thank you for what you do through Serve, the great organization, and your passion for helping people really shows.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the time. So hopefully you got a few questions in there. Once I get going, it's an easy.
It's all good.
It's
all good.
Take care.
Yeah.